Welcome, Bronco Nation, my game preview for Boise State versus Wyoming. This is a massive matchup game. Of course, Wyoming and Boise State have been a very tough series the last few years, but welcome, Bronco Nation, my game preview for Boise State versus Wyoming. This is an incredibly exciting game, an incredibly important game, because the winner of this game will very likely end up representing the Mountain Division in the Mountain West Championship game. Both Boise State and Wyoming 7-3 coming into this matchup. Boise State is 6-0. Wyoming is 5-1. So if Wyoming wins this, they'll have the head-to-head against Boise State. They will still have to go play Fresno State, who's 5-0 after losing to Boise State. A big part of that because of the return of Jake Haener. So a very, very tough Fresno State team. If Boise State loses this game, they could still advance to the Mountain West Championship game, but they would take Wyoming losing to Fresno State. And Boise State next week has a game against Utah State. So again, this is a very, very important matchup for Boise State to be able to get past Wyoming, because if they lose, they will not control their own destiny here, and they would still have to win out against Utah State, who is much better down the stretch as well. A 4-2 team in conference play who is out of contention because of the head-to-head matchup versus Wyoming. But that could be a tough game, and Fresno State would have to beat Wyoming if Boise State loses this game. So Boise State's best chance of getting the season right here. You know, obviously last year, 7-5, don't meet the conference goals of representing in the conference championship game, don't defend the blue very well, don't defeat their rivals. All those things Boise State has done so much better this year. Undefeated on the blue, have gone out and beaten almost all of their rivals. Well, this is their last hurdle on their journey to getting to the Mountain West Championship game, their last major hurdle here. If they beat Wyoming in this one, it won't matter what happens in the Utah State game. They will go to the Mountain West Championship game. So let's look at this game. November 19th, 5 p.m. Mountain Central Time, CBS Sports Network, 79% chance of winning for Boise State and given a 14-point advantage by Vegas. But this is not as far away a game as these analysts here are predicting, because this is going to be a tough matchup because it's always tight going up and playing at Wyoming. Obviously, Boise State losing to Wyoming in 2016. We'll talk about that when we talk about the series history. But both of these teams are definitely coming in here and going to be playing a very, very tough matchup, even if the weather is good, which right now it's supposed to be sunny, high of 32, so it's going to be chilly, but no snow predicted right now. They do have snow predicted on Thursday, about a 50% chance, but no snow predicted on Saturday right now. However, even if the weather is good, it is going to be cold. It is going to be a Wyoming team that is hungry, a Wyoming team that is ready to play, and a Boise State team that is very injury depleted, especially on defense. So let's look here at the series history before we get into the keys players and then the keys to the game, and then the summary here with a score prediction at the end. So series history, Boise State has dominated this series for the most part here. 15 games won, 1 loss. So 15-1 in Boise State's favor. They opened up the series in 2002 with a 35-13 win there by Boise State. Now, of course, there was a lot of blowouts there between 2002 and 2015. However, in 2016, Boise State goes up to Wyoming and they lose in dramatic fashion, end up getting a safety against them, and that 2 points ends up being the difference in the game. 28-30 point loss to Wyoming. It was huge. Wyoming fans still talk about it because it's really the best thing that's happened to Wyoming ever. So Wyoming fans definitely remember that game. They definitely love to rub that game, even though they've lost every other game in the series. They love to rub that game in Boise State fans' faces. Love to call out, Boise's not a state. Well, you know what, Wyoming, when you don't have a city big enough to you have your school named after, I mean, that's not a great sign either. That's why you guys are Wyoming. So, but Boise State versus Wyoming, there is definitely an attempt, I think, by Wyoming fans to make this a rivalry, and Boise State fans do not consider this a rivalry game, but Wyoming fans treat it almost like it is a rivalry game, and I think there's an attempt to do that. Now, best way for Boise State to put that away is to get another win. They did that in 2021, last time the two teams met. Boise State winning that game 23-13, but the last 3 matchups have each been won by Boise State, but each of them have been by 10 points or less. So ever since that loss in 2016, there was a good win after that by Boise State, but it has been competitive. Craig Bull, a big part of that, an amazing coach here for Wyoming. It's going to take everything Boise State can put on the table to go out and get this win. This is by no means a guaranteed win, and this is definitely a game that Wyoming is going to present their best. So let's talk about key players here. regardless again of weather, and the weather could be a factor here. I mean, it could end up snowing. It's again not predicted to, but anything can happen when you are that high and it's that cold. But the three key players for me are all going to be involved in the running game, because I think that is how Boise State is going to win this game. If they are able to win this game, is by focusing on what they're good at, focusing on the running game. Number one for me, quarterback Taylor Green, 294 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. Also has 1,300 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. But his legs are his best skill set. It's something we haven't seen that you really use that much of late. Second key player for me, Ashton Jeanty, 490 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. So this is in, as you can see, ascending order. However, his production has really dropped off. Not what he's been able to put on the field when given the chance, but his carries, the amount of times he's been allowed to go on the field and produce, has really dropped off. You know, the last 3 games since the Air Force game where he left with an injury, he has had less than 10 carries in every single game since then. So the question, as we asked, is that injury a factor, or is it just more that Boise State's choosing to lean more on Holani? This is a player who demands to be on the field. His skill set, I mean, this is the most talented true freshman running back I think I've ever seen for Boise State. He demands to be on the field. He is the future of this program for sure, but he also has something to contribute right now. He should be getting more playing time, especially if the last 3 games, the decision is not be injury driven, but more let's focus on Holani. Well, let's talk about Holani, because George Holani is the best on this team when it comes to the running game. 845 yards rushing, 10 touchdowns. He's had 5 100-plus yard rushing games. This is a back who can beat you every which way. I mean, he's a receiving threat. He's a running threat. Obviously, he is not just a speed back. He can also get you with some power as well. I mean, he drives through so many tackles. He is more shifty and maneuverable than almost any back I've seen for Boise State. When he is fully healthy, and he is fully healthy right now, when he is fully healthy, he's one of the most unstoppable backs in this conference, one of the best running backs in this conference, bar none. And he is looking 100%. So these 3 here are my key players for Boise State, because I really think the running game, I've said it in the last few videos, but I really think the running game is what's going to be the key focus here for Boise State to go out and have success in this matchup versus Wyoming. Let's talk about Wyoming. It's also going to center around their running game here in Titus Swen, the successor to Xavier Valladay, who left, of course, for Arizona State. He has had 752 yards rushing, averaging 4.6 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. One of the reasons that he's been such a focus is because Wyoming was wrecked by the transfer portal. He was one of the players to stay with the program when the player's been there for a little while, to stay with the program. They've really built their offense around him. Now, a big part of the reason that he's going to be such a key player, in addition to him being such an important part of the run game, is that there are some question marks here for the Wyoming quarterback position, because Andrew Peasley, was the Utah State transfer, was hurt in the last matchup. Now, that meant that Jaden Clemens ended up coming in at quarterback. The sophomore completed 7 out of 11 attempts for 90 touchdowns and 90 yards. Sorry, not 90 touchdowns. That would be insane. 90 yards and a touchdown, and also ran 6 times for 32 yards and a touchdown. Now, he could be a key player here because he's a little bit of an unknown. You know, there's only so much tape that Boise State has on him. In the past, under maybe not last season, but definitely under the Harsin years, and even a couple times last year, you know, when there's been a new quarterback introduced to the mix that Boise State hasn't necessarily been preparing for the whole time, new guys have had a lot of success against Boise State because the defense just doesn't know exactly how to prepare for them, and a big part of Boise State's defensive success is just game planning and preparing. When you don't have a guy, you don't know what he's going to be able to do, especially when he's a running quarterback. Boise State has struggled in the past against mobile quarterbacks. We saw it versus BYU. This could be a guy who could have a huge impact. Now, it's not being released yet who is going to be the starting quarterback necessarily for this one. We don't know how significant Peasley's injuries are right now. And this is from a news report that I read that was released 15 hours ago. So some things could have changed. By the time you watch this video, there might be some official news out there. But there's a pretty good chance here, especially considering that the sophomore was able to go out and get the win versus Colorado State, and that Peasley, even if he's okay, might not be 100%. Good chance that he's going to get a chance to start this game. He's going to need to have a huge game here to get the win against Boise State. Now, the last player here for key players of the game for Wyoming, it's going to be their top tackler, linebacker Easton Gibbs, 6'2", 230-pound sophomore, 88 tackles, 2 sacks, a pass defended, and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Now, of course, the last time that Boise State lost to Wyoming, linebackers played a huge role. Of course, there's that gif of the linebackers celebrating the safety in the end zone. So if Wyoming wants to have a similar result, so they need to have a similar performance from their defense in this one. It's going to be led by Gibbs here. All right, keys to the game. Keys to the game for Boise State versus Wyoming. Number one key for Boise State, I kind of mentioned it already, focus on what you are good at. This is not the time for experimenting with the playbook, and it's not the time for developing players. Boise State, last few games, even ones that they really needed to win and it was not guaranteed, have been experimenting with their playbook. They established what works with Fresno State and San Diego State. Run, 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 run. Use your quarterback's legs in the running game. Use both at Genty and Holani as in your backfield, and use the short passing game. That is what works for Boise State. That is almost unstoppable when Boise State runs that. It's not necessarily the most explosive or creative offense, but it is proven, and it's when you have three running backs that you have to account for there, because you use Taylor Green in the running game, is basically another running back. When you have to account for those three, and you are just doubling up to try and stop those guys, you're going to open up opportunities in the short passing game as well. And it's just a recipe for absolute dominance. Boise State has gone away from that. They've gone to using more of a balanced attack. Still focus on the running game, but definitely using Taylor Green's arm more in an attempt to develop him. Now, he has shown some improvement, and there's been some games where Boise State had that freedom to experiment. Colorado State, terrible defense, terrible offense. Boise State was going to win that game either way. Nevada, Boise, terrible offense, terrible defense. Boise State was going to win that game pretty much either way. They could work around and see what works. Versus BYU, not the case. Boise State still experimenting. Boise State still developing. Boise State losing that game because they didn't focus on what works. Boise State needs to come into this game and reestablish that run-focused offense that was so dominant early on and which has not been proven that it can be stopped, which makes this offensive line look much better than they deserve to look because the defense is getting pounded. They're on their heels and they're having to cover so many options in the running game. It makes this offense look smooth and efficient. The passing game should still be part of it. Boise State's got some great wide receivers who are stepping up. The deep passing game can still be part of the game, but it shouldn't be the focus, and Boise State needs to stop taking risks in the deep passing game. Boise State's gotten lucky. Some bad DB, some bad weather conditions have helped Boise State avoid some interceptions here by Taylor Green, but there have also been some really bad passes that would have been picks if it hadn't worked out a little bit of a different situation. So the deep passing game should be use it as you're able to set it up through your short runs, through your short passing game and your running game, but focusing on those great tight ends that you have, Rice Smith, Hopper, focusing on those great wide receivers that you have. I mean, you've got some guys that are really stepping up right now. Focus on that short passing game with the running game and using Taylor Green's legs in the game. I can't say that enough times. Use your best player's best ability in the game. Use Taylor Green's legs in the game. Boise State should have a chance here to have a really dominant offense if they work this out properly. Wyoming is giving up a lot of yards in both the passing game and the running game. They're actually 72nd in both of these categories, so very nice coordinated effort there by Wyoming. They've given up 155.4 yards per game in the rushing game, and they've given up 234.6 yards passing per game, so 72nd in both of those categories. So there will be opportunities in both the passing game and the running game. Boise State should still focus on going after both, but they should set it up off of the dominant running game that we saw with so much success, and a big part of that is using Taylor Green's legs in the running game. All right, number 2 here, run the ball in the red zone. You've kind of a theme here, run. Well, Boise State has been using the run game to great success. When it gets inside the 20, it goes away from that. Lots of passes inside the red zone, lots of fades, and it is not working out. Boise State having to settle on field goals really more times than not, especially the last few games, because it is going away from the thing that works. I'm not saying you get in the red zone and you just try to pound it up the middle from the 10 a bunch of times. Boise State needs to still be creative. Still needs to be using, misdirections, a couple different looks, maybe some sweeps with the wide receivers coming across. You fake some handoffs. You use Taylor Green's legs in the running game where it's an option place. Boise State's definitely still got to stay creative, but they have to be using the running game more. You're setting up some third and short, some fourth and short type situations where Boise State can then punch it in. versus going to the passing game right away and a lot of times ending up short. I mean, right now, Boise State's red zone offense is 59th in the country with an 85% completion percentage as far as getting scores in the red zone. However, 12 of those 41 scores that they've had in the red zone have been field goals. They are 29 out of 41 when you take away the field goals, with only a 71% touchdown rating percentage, overall touchdown scored in the red zone. Overall, I don't know where I got off track there, but 71% overall touchdowns scored in the red zone. That's their overall scoring percentage when you take away the field goals. Boise State being forced to field goals more than not because they're not using the running game effectively, and again, not using Taylor Green's legs effectively. Use it last game, him running it in, and they scored. I mean, more of that, please. Boise State has done a great job of establishing this fantastic running game. Now they just need to use it more. Last key here, shut down the running game. So run the ball, do what you're good at, run the ball again inside the red zone, and then on the other side, shut down Wyoming's running game. Wyoming has 1,888 yards rushing. They only have 1,284 yards passing, and most of those yards are not going to be available in this one because, again, or probably not going to be available because Peasley looks like he's going to be out. So force the new quarterback, force the sophomore Clemson, who, again, Wyoming only beat Colorado State by 1 point. I believe it was 14-13. 99% certain I'm getting that score right, but it's only by 1 point. And a big part of that was because, well, it's a rivalry game, so a lot of things can happen in that. But a big part of that was because they were without their passing quarterback. So forced Clemens to carry the load. He did an okay job, 7 out of 11, 90 and a touchdown. But this is not a guy who is going to go out there and just destroy you through the air, and especially if he feels the weight of the game upon him. This is a massive game, and he feels like he's got to go out there and do it by himself. It's going to be a much worse performance overall for this new QB. Even if Peasley is back, though, even if he is able to make this game, he's only been completing 52.8% of his passes, and he has 9 touchdowns, but he also has 6 interceptions on the season. So even if Peasley is able to come back, it's still a good idea to force Wyoming into the air because that is not their strong point. This Craig Bowl offense runs through the running game. That is where this offense finds its strength. Now, Boise State's defense is greatly depleted in this one. They obviously already lost Tarles. Banya has left the program. Now, there's some question marks here because Noah was held out of last week's game, and it's uncertain whether he's going to be ready to go for this one. Dimitri Washington left with what looked like it could be a season-ending injury. That's what a lot of people were reporting, and then he put on Twitter that he was back out on the field practicing, and it sounds like he might be back and may be able to play. Again, a lot of murkiness surrounding that, but you could potentially there have 2 of your top players on defense not available. Gabe Hunter, the replacement there at the linebacker position, left last week's game with an injury where he was clearly in pain, something with the arm-shoulder region, and the sideline reporters were saying that he was okay to come back into the game, but I don't believe that he did. And so that's another guy who could be out. So now you're kind of out 3 potential linebackers there for Boise State. And then when you get into the secondary, Tyreek Jones left the game. The nickelback left the game with an injury, did not return. And then Zion Washington, his backup, left the game with an injury. So there were so many injuries versus Nevada, and which was such a shame because it was a blowout. You never want to see injuries in a blowout. It's just a waste. And obviously, it wasn't just Boise State dealing with injuries. Nevada also getting a serious injury. And the good news is that player who had the neck injury that looked pretty bad, his x-rays came back negative. He's good to go. He's been released from the hospital. No serious injuries that they are tracking there. So that's a prayer answered for sure, but not by just Nevada fans, but Boise State fans as well, because at the end of the day, it's just a game. You don't want to see kids getting hurt. But the point here is that Boise State's got a lot of depletion here on defense. I think the biggest hit part of this is, especially if Noah and Dimitri Washington aren't going to be able to play, it's definitely going to be that linebacker portion of the field. Obviously, the D-line, though, looks great. If the D-line is going to be Boise State's strength in this one, especially if you've got questions in the secondary and you got questions at the linebacker position, Boise State's D-line looks great. It's being buttressed by Divine Obucherry, who's getting more game action, which is fantastic for Boise State because this is a guy who can dominate a game. So Boise State lean on that strength there with that D-line, right? And then those guys can set up whoever the backups are, whoever the starters are, whoever's able to play at that linebacker spot, those guys can set those guys up for success. Boise State can stop and dominate the running game here, take away Wyoming's main arm, and then they'll just have to trust the guys in the secondary who have had a kind of a rough go of it, especially of late. But Boise State can force Wyoming to the air, which is not their strength, take away the running game. They're going to have a chance for a lot of success in this matchup. So summary overall, Boise State needs to keep the defense on the sidelines as much as possible. A lot of guys injured, a lot of depletion there. Boise State needs to keep their offense on the field. And again, that goes back to the running game. Boise State running the clock out, time of possession, having the ball as long as possible, keeping their defense fresh, keeping them from getting more injuries, and keeping the guys who are out there from being able to develop that depth. So Boise State definitely needs to keep their defense on the sideline and use their full stable of running backs. So that means make sure that you've got Genty and Holani getting a good division there of the carries, both of them getting heavy usage in this game. Going to some of your guys who have had some opportunities to shine. Noah, he didn't get any carries last week, and he had a kick return, and then I didn't see him again after that, and I don't know if something happened on that kick return, some kind of injury or something like that, but he didn't come back in, so it'd be great to see Elion Noah back out there, being able to get back into the game. And then, of course, Boise State's got some other guys there. Tyler Crow had a really nice performance. Maybe he gets some opportunities. But Boise State focusing there on your top two guys, Ashton Genty, George Holani, making sure those guys are getting a good amount of carries in this one and slowing the game down overall so that Boise State's defense, which again is struggling with depth issues, has a chance to come out and play fresh and strong and isn't having to test that depth. This will not be an easy game, though. This is not going to be an easy game. Craig Bohl is one of the best coaches in the Mountain West. He does so much with so little there at Wyoming. He is going to have this team ready to go. The Wyoming fan base is motivated. They are fired up. They are very, very active on the Mountain West Conference Alliance Facebook group that I started right now. A lot of comments on there. They have a lot of confidence in their team, and I think that's well earned. And they are ready to go. It's at home there for Wyoming, so their fan base is going to be pumped up, ready to help this team go out and get a win is what they're going to be trying to do in this one. And then the team wants this. I mean, this is the hurdle, just like it is for Boise State. This is the hurdle for them getting to the Mountain West Championship game. So that Wyoming is going to be fired up. Boise State, if they stick to their game plan, if they can weather the storm, as a figure of speech there with Wyoming, with their bad weather conditions that they've had there in the past for Boise State games, if they can weather the storm, weather the early attempts here by Wyoming, have that lead going into the third quarter, this should be a game Boise State can win. But it is not going to be an easy affair. Nobody should be overlooking this game, and I don't think they are. But Boise State needs to be going out there and doing what they already know works, versus trying to establish something different in this one. Until Wyoming can prove that they can stop you running your best offense, the offense that you have run effectively against Fresno State and San Diego State, and then when you've gone to it throughout games, it has worked effectively since then. Until Wyoming proves that they can stop that, there's no need to try and test them in other areas. So my score prediction on this one, overall, assuming the weather holds, or assuming it does not snow, that's going to change everything greatly. But assuming the weather holds, I think Boise State will win this game 38-28. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Boise State maybe scores another touchdown at the end there in the fourth to put this game beyond reach and widen that margin. But I could see this game being a one-possession game for a good chunk of the matchup. I hope Boise State proves me wrong in that they come in here and just demolish Wyoming. I mean, that would be great to see and to quiet down a lot of these Wyoming fans. They've gotten just a little bit too big for their britches or barrels or whatever they use in Wyoming. But it's definitely gotten a little bit out of hand. So Boise State coming into this one and just demolishing Wyoming would be fantastic. However, this is going to be a very, very tough game. I do think Boise State can win this, especially if they come in and they run the offense that they're good at and use all of their players' abilities, Taylor Green's legs. Boise State can come in here and have a great game. But I do think it's going to be a close one, especially with depleted defense. Wyoming's going to have some chances to score. It's going to be up to Boise State to be able to answer and be able to counter them in this matchup. I can't wait. It's going to be an exciting game. Make sure that you let me know in the comment section how you think this game is going to go, your thoughts on this matchup overall. And thanks so much for watching. As always, like and subscribe, and go Big Blue!